Hello and welcome to a new episode of Crazy Buildings. Today I'm standing here in Shanghai's Jiading district in the Nantong automotive city. Behind me is the Formula One racing track. Next to me is the Porsche Experience Center. And here in Nantong there are a lot of automotive companies, including VW, the headquarters of Volkswagen, as well as a lot of automotive supplier companies. Nowadays, Shanghai has of course developed into a financial hub, and in terms of manufacturing, a lot of light manufacturing, assembly works, research and development is taking place in Shanghai, and some of the more heavy manufacturing is taking place a bit further out, for example in Haimen district of Nantong. That's where we are going today. I brought along this time in order to track how long it will take us to get there, and once there we will be talking about, is it better to buy properties in China or to rent properties in China? Let's go! Driving over to Nantong used to be a hassle because one has to cross the Yangtze River. However, nowadays there are already a number of bridges and tunnels in place, and there are additional ones already under construction. So today it will hopefully take us less than 1 hour to get there. And in Nantong we will be visiting our friends of Plainvim International, who are running some of the nicest business parks in all of China. And we will be exploring the Haimen district of Nantong, where we see a lot of interesting investments and business activities going on these days. So we are now on the road for about 30 minutes and have just been passing by Taizang. And one thing I appreciate a lot is how nice the service areas have become in China in recent years, with international coffee chains, international restaurant chains, and so on. And speaking of today's topic, is it better to buy one's property or rent one's property? Well, in retail properties, including restaurant properties, it takes about 18 years of paying rent to arrive at the same amount as one would need to pay to buy one's property. And with that, most retailers prefer to rent and to put their money into their business expansion. Only some family-owned retailers might like to own their retail premises in order to increase stability, in order to maybe experience capital appreciation over the years, and in order to invest some of their profits from their business into real estate. So we are now crossing the Sutong Daqiao over the Yangtze River, the third largest river in the world. And the Sutong Daqiao, the Sutong Bridge, is 30 kilometers long, as along the river is 10 kilometers wide. And we are about 45 minutes on the road now and arriving in Nantong as soon as we get off the bridge. We are arriving. It took us 57 minutes to get here from Shanghai, from Nantong, which is of course already the northwestern part of Shanghai. And here in Nantong we see right away there is available vacant land available for purchase. There are existing buildings available for rent, and land cost here in Nantong is about 300 Chinese yuan a square meter, or about 200,000 Chinese yuan per mu. And if renting, it's about 15 to 25 Chinese yuan per square meter per month. And when buying industrial buildings, it's about 3,000 to 4,000 Chinese yuan per square meter. And that already shows that in industrial, it just takes about 12 years of paying rent to arrive at the same amount of that it would cost to buy one's building. However, most companies nowadays still prefer to rent because they like to go asset light, and also because of some other reasons that we will be talking about in a moment. moving right along, we are now on our way to the next stop. And Nantong, by the way, is of course not as big as Beijing or Shanghai, but with about 7.8 million inhabitants, it is quite a sizable city. And one of Nantong's largest districts is Haimen district, and that's where we are going now. Should take us another about 15 or so minutes to get there. So here we are at Plainview International in Haimen. Excellent buildings, over 10 meters ceiling height, column width of more than 25 meters times 9 meters, floor loading capacity of 3 tons. So excellent buildings for manufacturing purposes. And we spoke earlier about the fact that actually industrial real estate is comparably cheap to purchase. However, nowadays a lot of companies still prefer to rent, and reasons include that, well, nowadays we have such beautiful buildings available for rent, but also that the companies like to go asset light and minimize their financial risk. And finally, that the government is more likely to give you a lot of subsidies, like rent subsidies, like tax incentives and so on, when you're a tenant and not an owner of your property. And that of course makes a huge difference. Here we are at the Haixin Business Building, one of the nicest office buildings in Haimen. Rental rates are at about 2.4 Chinese yuan per square meter per day, and purchase rates are at about 10,000 Chinese yuan. And that shows us two things. One, that rents are at about a third of what they would be in a city like Shanghai or Beijing, and that the ratio is also different. Here, you would have a return on your office investment of about 8%, or in other words, it would take about 12 years of paying rent in order to buy your building, very similar to industrial. Whereas in Shanghai, for an office investment, your return would only be about 5%, so it would take about 20 years of paying rent to make up for the purchase price. And that is probably because over here, you might also have a higher risk. It may take a longer time to find a tenant. It might be harder to find a replacement tenant when you lost your previous tenant. So that is how that comes to be. Now for residential, the ratio is even much worse. It is about 45 years. So it takes about 45 years of paying rent to make up for your purchase price of your apartment. And that means you have a return rate of only about 2.2 or 2.3% in China and in most of Asia. And that means that actually renting seems much more affordable unless you have other considerations, like you want to own an apartment in order to be able to marry, and maybe because you believe in further capital appreciation. Here we are at the Haimen district government, and we hear from our clients that they provide great business support to international companies, including huge financial support and also fast processing of business applications. And they told us that already now construction is underway for the new tunnel between here and Taizang, including high-speed rail and cars, and at that time it will take less than an hour to drive from Shanghai to Haimen and less than half an hour to drive from Taizang to Haimen. And they also told us that construction is underway for the new Haimen International Airport that will be connected by high-speed rail towards both Shanghai Hongqiao and Shanghai Pudong, and make the air traffic over Shanghai less congested and providing a new option for international travelers. And with that, it is time for today's edition of True Story. And the true story is that we had over the past 3 years, those 3 COVID years, about 110 companies that still decided to go ahead and set up new offices and new manufacturing sites in China, including about 7 companies that during the strict lockdown of Shanghai that we had in early 2022 said we are still going ahead and we are acquiring new manufacturing sites because we believe in the future of this market. And they are now being rewarded for that decision because most economists predict that China's economy will now grow again at about 5 to 6%, so that China is basically adding the GDP of a Switzerland to its GDP. So a very positive outlook, and those companies secured their spaces during a time when prices were low, and they are now being rewarded for it.